purposes here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. I am your host, Megan Bolter. So welcome, and thank you for joining today's virtual event. We have representation from Enable Injections and Dickinson and Associates, a nanosite company. So for today's discussion, our event speakers will answer questions and openly share and discuss Enable Injections S/4HANA transformation. But before we kick off today's discussion, I do want to remind you that we are recording the event for on demand, and I'll send it out afterwards. Also, this is an interactive forum, so you can see that we've made people panelists so that they could speak and be on camera. So we encourage you to hop on camera, ask questions you may have along the way. If you'd like to ask a question, you can just go ahead and jump right in, or use the raise hand feature or the Q&A feature within Zoom, and we'll answer in real time, like whichever one you prefer. But please remember, it's a conversational virtual event. So our discussion will be much more valuable with questions and interaction from the audience. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guests and moderator. So we have Tim Flaherty. Tim is EVP and CFO of Enable Injections. So Tim has more than 25 years in private and public company experience in finance, HR, and information technology management. As EVP and Chief Financial Officer at Enable Injections, Tim is responsible for finance, accounting, and IT transformations, including leading the charge for their S/4 digital transformation and a series of incremental business improvements. Tim has a great blend of significant experience in executive finance, but also deep expertise in IT, which is one of the main reasons I'm so excited to be speaking with him today. So we're happy to have you join the conversation, Tim.
Well, thanks, Megan. Excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Next, we have Brad Wolf. He's Vice President of Corporate Development at Dickinson and Associates. As VP of Corporate Development, Brad has a proven track record of leading teams to successfully deliver on all types of digital transformations for their customers. For the last 20 years, he has been focused on supporting early-stage companies as they address challenges of how to best leverage technology in a rapid growth environment. He has worked closely with private equity and portfolio companies on acquisition strategy and asset integration. He has also worked with companies through full life cycles from early stage funding through public offerings. Happy to have you join the conversation, Brad.
Thank you, Megan, and also very happy to be here.
Awesome, thanks. Next, we have Lauren Reinhardt. As co-founder and chief operating officer of Ascensource, Lauren is dedicated to driving strategic growth for Ascensource partners, SAP customers and prospects, and SAP. And Lauren will be moderating today's session and facilitator of the discussion between our event speakers and the attendees. So thanks for joining us, Lauren. All right. For those of you who are not familiar with Enable Injections, I just thought I'd give a little summary to set the stage. So they are a medical device manufacturer that is revolutionizing patient care and comfort with their patented wearable drug delivery systems. Their products provide patients with a safe, convenient, and cost-effective alternative to IV fluid administration, which significantly improves lives. There is no other existing drug delivery devices currently that can accomplish what Enable Injections device can accomplish. Because of this, there's a huge market opportunity for Enable Injections. And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the projection for the global biologics market is $610 billion by 2025, which is coming up pretty quickly.
That's correct, Megan. And actually, by 2030, the market's going to be 1.2 trillion. So it's a huge market.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for keeping me honest there. I think that this really sets the stage, because of this incredible market opportunity and projection. Enable Injections must be nimble, flexible, and have the proper IT in place to really keep pace with the fluctuating demand of the business and capture that market share. That's a little bit more about Enable Injections. I'm going to pass it over to Lauren.
Yeah, so thanks, Tim. Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everyone, for joining. As a reminder, I encourage you to come on camera if you are able to do so. There's also the raise your hand feature certainly welcome to call on you or submit a question via the chat. I prefer not to do hardly any talking. I'd rather really make sure that those of you who are with us today, that you get your questions answered. This is really an open conversation, no specific agenda. So Tim, I'll kind of kick it off with you, if you don't mind sharing, just a little bit more about Enable Injections and kind of, why you're here today in terms of, what project did you do? What was the scope, so we can really kind of understand, your SAP journey thus far.
Sure. So a lot of people like to refer to Enable as a startup. We're actually, I would say, a late stage startup or an early stage company. We've been around since 2010, and the company really didn't get traction until 2014. At that time, we signed our first large pharmaceutical deal, and in 2015, we started ramping up hiring. I was actually hired in February of 2015. We had 10 employees at that time, and today we have roughly 180 employees. So with that large growth, obviously we had to be prepared for scalability, and SAP systems were one of the things that we needed to look at, or ERP in general. In addition to that, we're currently seeking FDA regulatory approval that we hope to have really soon.
Awesome. So what did you guys end up implementing? Kind of what did that starting point, when did you start your implementation, and kind of what did that project scope look like?
So just to talk about the company a little bit. So we're a business to business. We actually, and here is a little prop, a picture of our device. We actually build this product specific for the pharmaceutical company. And with that, the pharmaceutical company will pay us milestone payments, product sales, and royalties on drug sales. So we're not just a widget off the shelf. We cater toward that specific drug. That drug and device are approved as a combination product. They go through FDA approval together, and then the product and drug get launched together. So with these pharmaceutical companies, we're talking miracle biologic drugs, drugs for Crohn's disease, MS, Parkinson's disease, blood disorders. And with the market being so large, you can imagine that these drugs can be in the millions of devices per year. So the market gets big quick. In addition, the pharmaceutical companies are looking for compliance. They're looking for best practices. They're looking for scalability. How can we have confidence in this little company called Enable? So, reputation being part of it, and us being able to start to land pharmaceutical deals, we had to start looking at the ERP landscape. So we did look at, we knew we couldn't go middle market, the smaller Great Plains of the world. We had to be able to scale large, scale quick. So we looked at the Oracles, we looked at the Dynamics, we looked at the SAPs. Why, I can get into why SAP, one, reputation. 80 to 90% of the pharmaceutical companies use SAP. So that weighs from a reputation standpoint highly with the pharmaceutical companies. Two, scalability and the systems being fully integrated. So being able to bring on the modules at the right time throughout the journey. Also, a lot of folks, when they think of big systems, they think of a big bang approach. Actually, SAP has the ability to do a phased approach and bring on the modules as you need them. So us being somewhat of a startup, fiscal responsibility is important as well. So all those things combined is really what made us pick SAP. And then if you think about the phased approach, this is a lot to bite off. So that's where I think, Dickinson played a big part coming in and recommending a phased approach. And for Enable, if you think about how we phased our approach in 2017, we started looking at core financial controlling. We brought on the FICO modules in roughly 3 months. We were up and running in 2018, early 2018. Then we started looking at the core sales distribution, production planning, the manufacturing modules. We also looked at success factors in the 2019 timeframe. In the 2020 timeframe, we looked at the quality modules, document control, plant maintenance, also some success factors, performance goals, and planning. In 21, we got into product lifecycle management and also the additional enhancements in success factors, such as onboarding, recruiting. And now here we are in 22, trying to really prepare us for commercialization and FDA approval in the near future, in addition to continue to evaluate modules that would benefit the organization, such as business analytics.
No, that's a great overview of the scope and really kind of covers the why. Brad, I'll turn it to you. Engaging with a company like Enable Injections, what was that process like? Kind of, knowing where they were in the business and how they needed a project and an ERP that would scale with their business. What types of advice were you giving them along the way?
Yeah, and Lauren, it was a great example of a company that we are very comfortable and well suited to work with. It's always been our philosophy that our goal is to meet our customers where they're at in their life cycle today, with an eye on addressing business outcomes that are pressing, but also considering the future. What do they need to scale? Making sure that they've got the right considerations for both today and for the long term. And Tim did a great job of kind of outlining when we first met. Obviously, he was evaluating multiple systems, and I think the discussions just aligned around Tim having enough vision to understand he needed a solution that he could deploy quickly. He wanted to leverage best practices because he didn't want to reinvent things, which I think SAP is well suited, especially in this space, to cover. But he also had an eye towards the future and understanding that going from I call them pre-revenue, but funded life sciences company to where they're at today. He had a great understanding of what it was going to look like in a very short period of time, and I think we were able to lay out a vision and a roadmap with him that addressed those business outcomes he was looking for over time, and to be able to deploy those things quickly for him and to get the right business outcomes. I think it was a great alignment of the companies and kind of where I think we shine in this life sciences space, whether it's addressing things in the R&D preclinical side, or considering the manufacturing components, or all the way through commercialization, which is where Tim and team are close to going. So,
no, I appreciate that, and really, selecting the right partner is such a key part of any sort of technology deployment and investment. And certainly, Tim, you touched on kind of why SAP from the industry standard and the ability to kind of do this phased approach. But Tim, I'd love to hear from you kind of why Dickinson, once you made the technology selection and that you guys were going to go down the SAP path, what was it about, Dickinson that made you guys, decide they were the right fit? And, what was your experience like, in working with them?
So I've been through quite a few implementations in my career, and a partner can definitely make or break an implementation. So a partner is as important, if not more important, than the system itself. And we did interview several partners. A few key reasons why Dickinson. One, their collected knowledge and experience is very extensive. They've been in the industry for a very, very long time, And also a lot of the people from Dickinson are local to Cincinnati. They started in Cincinnati. And so I think having accessibility to your partners quickly is very important. There's nothing like face-to-face contact, coming in, being able to whiteboard out the projects, and then getting results very quickly. So that was a key. One, their reputation. Two, their locality, their experience. And then three, I found Dickinson to be more than just an implementation partner. They're really a trusted advisor. So they came in, they gave us some recommendations on financial institutions that could help us finance our systems. Also, they did recommend the phased approach instead of the big bang approach. They recommended what modules to bring on when. They also will admit if it's not their sweet spot. For example, success factors. They said this is not our sweet spot, but we recommend Aspire. And Aspire is actually who we use for our success factors, who has also been an excellent partner for us.
No, that's great. And Brad, I'll turn it to you because it truly is a partnership, you know. In your opinion and your experience, you know, what, you know, how was Enable Injections, you know, what were they like to work with, and what do you think, what qualities and skills did they bring to the conversation to allow it to be successful?
Yeah, it's been a great partnership, and again, to mention, you know, we've been working together for quite a few years now through their journey, and frankly, it's just been a lot of fun because of the business they're in and the lives that they're changing. I was fortunate enough to kind of meet a couple of their potential patients at one point, and just to see their eyes light up when, you know, you talk about not having to go to a clinic for 8 hours 3 times a week to get your medications, where you can, you know, clip it on, push the button, and go about your day. It's very exciting. So it's been a great partnership. It really has been one where, as Tim mentioned, and I think this is part of the value proposition of the Navisite team, Dickinson now Navisite, is, you know, we really do view it as a long-term partnership. Our job is to provide that advice and direction, and you know, most times we like to think 80% of the time we can provide the ongoing support that's needed, but we're also, again, being a good partner, very quick to point out where it's not something that we think we're the right partner to do, but to help, and to mention whether it's some financing components or some specific niche areas. Part of our role as a trusted partner is also to find the right solution for our partners. So we certainly view these things as important, and we're committed to those partners, and that means the success of Tim and the Enable team. And we do everything we can, both directly and indirectly, to support the success and the business outcomes that Enable's been looking for.
Perfect. And we do have a couple questions coming in, so I'll certainly pause and make sure we address those. You know, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat or come off mute. But Andy, I believe you had one.
Yeah. Hi, my name's Andy. I lead the demand generation team here at AscendSource. I did actually have a question for you, Tim. I mean, looking at your company with a quick look, I know you said you started the company in 2010 or 2011. Yeah. Yeah, and then I mean, just the growth of your company is pretty apparent and kind of obvious. I'm curious in terms of when you're, because you mentioned like you were looking at a lot of different solutions, like the technologies. You mentioned success factors. I mean, you're working with Navisite, but how did you kind of choose to invest in those technologies during your funding phase, and how did you kind of justify that investment, you know, assuming with the anticipation of the ROI? Because that's something that I'm definitely kind of curious about, and what kind of goes about within the thought process in that phase for you guys.
Yes, so we probably wouldn't have our first or second pharma partner if we didn't invest in SAP. One of the first things that pharma asked us when they came on board is, you know, you're talking they're very valuable drug, sometimes 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 per patient, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on patient treatment. They want to be assured that their drug is going to be safe. So one, how are you going to scale? How are you going to have part traceability? How are you going to be able to handle recalls? How are you going to implement best practices? All of these came into play when evaluating an SAP. And, SAP has life sciences best practices built in. And when we started the business, we were on just QuickBooks. We had no integrated ERP. So, the sooner you can invest and start, the better from a Greenfield approach, because you can adopt the SAP best practices without having to change or migrate your current organization. And then obviously fiscal responsibility was key to our investors. So if a phased approach was not available, then the ROI would not have been there for us. And there's no way we could have invested in a big bang approach right out of the gate. So being able to phase that, we're all going on 5-6 years now. We've been able to spread that funding appropriately and then bring on the modules that were most critical when we had the cash at the time.
And I'll just add, I think this is very prevalent throughout the companies we deal with in the early stage life sciences space. And I always joke with Tim, I don't know whether to call him the CFO or the CFR, the Chief Fundraiser, or the Chief Financial Officer. And by the way, Tim, congratulations again on the last round. Amazing. But this is always a balancing act, right? So raising funds and getting yourself in a position to run the business is critical, but then being a good financial steward of those funds becomes front and center after you've raised them. And I think Enable's done a great job of being able to balance those two things and put themselves in a great position while not taking any shortcuts along the way. And we see that on a regular basis, regardless of where the challenge is at, right? Early stage startups, whether it's how do we take cost out of the labs, right, where we're trying to do more science quicker and cheaper, and or it's putting the foundational enterprise in place in a reasonable way and rolling it out as appropriate. Those are all the kind of challenges that we see in this industry on a regular basis. And I think Tim and team have done a great job of kind of managing both raising the funds as well as managing them appropriately. So kudos to Tim.
And Andy, I would just like to add, so when we do commercially launch, we're not going to be launching a couple widgets, right? I mean, these are, hundreds of thousands to millions of units. So you can imagine if you didn't have a system to track that out of the gate, you could get yourself in trouble really quick, because these are products that are going to be used with humans and patients, and you have to be able to track and trace and make sure that it's tracked all the way through the life cycle.
So I do want to be respectful. I know a lot of people have questions, but I do want to follow up on that real quick. So, I mean, seems like you were very intuitive in making sure that you had a roadmap before you had to cross that bridge. When did that conversation start with you? Like, kind of what time frame, what phase?
Yeah. So to be honest, I started with the company in 2015. We had our first partner, but you can imagine the time that it gets to, by the time you introduce a pharma partner to the time you get to market, it's about a 4 to 5 year time frame. So you sign them up, you go through, feasibility, clinical trials, then commercial launch, which is about 4 years. And then it's usually about another 4 years to stabilize manufacturing and ramp up your production. So it's really about an 8-year cycle. We brought on our first partner in 2014. So I started understanding the cycles, bringing on the partners. After we looked at that, then we engaged on bringing on the ERP. So that conversation started soon after I started. I started shopping businesses, partners. 2016 is when we really got engaged. And then once we brought on Dickinson in, I would say early 17 is when we started doing this roadmap and whiteboarding out what modules make sense when. So we didn't just, put our blinders on and say, we're just looking at FICO. We went all the way from, I would say we haven't gone until 22. We went to probably 20. And then as we've gone through the process and added the modules, we realized what other modules were important as we've gone through this process, which is why, we're looking at business analytics because we do very intense strategic planning. We look out 5 to 10 years, and business analytics is only good when you have the data already in the system. So it's good to bring it on a couple years later after you start populating the data.
Yeah, no, like you said, building blocks. No, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Tim, I just actually
Yeah,
looked back, and I think I saw 8 iterations of that initial roadmap that we actually went through. So a lot of planning up front.
Yeah, we did have a question come through about where you chose to deploy S4. So did you guys go on-prem, cloud, hybrid, and what drove the ultimate decision?
So our S4 is on-prem. We're in a co-location, a very secure co-location, and then SuccessFactors is actually in the cloud. And the reason that we went on-prem is really, our founders are pretty, they want to be able to control the data and make sure that it's secure, which cloud was fairly not as popular back in 17 as it's become in 22. And also, there's been a lot of improvements from cloud security as we've seen over the years. So that's the main reason we went to on-prem. We will continue to evaluate and investigate in the cloud because I think it provides scalability without bringing on resources, and it also there's not as much of a heavy lift from a update standpoint, where now we're seeing our in-house resources having to do more heavy lifting with upgrades. So if we were starting today, probably my decision would be cloud out of the gate, but since we started in 17, that's why we went on-prem.
No, that makes sense. We did have another question come in. You mentioned SAP Analytics Cloud, that you're looking at that. Are you considering that for business analytics, or can you share a little bit about what that, what those discussions are looking like and kind of what you're evaluating next?
Yeah, so we're looking at the whole SAC planning package as a whole, not only from a strategic planning standpoint, but from a budgeting forecasting standpoint. And we plan on doing that in a phased approach as well. Looking at, right now we do strategic planning in an Excel worksheet that has probably 50 workbooks, and we're trying to convert that to repeat our Excel strategic planning into SAP. So that'll be our phase 1. Our phase 2 will be looking at doing our budgeting process in SAP, and then looking at budget to actuals, which again, we do a lot of that outside of systems today. And then within planning, there's inherent graphs and data points that come with the package. And then phase 3 would be more of a robust analytics, where you can think of a functional manager coming in, turning on their computer, and they have a very robust dashboard that tells them their key indicators for the day. They can click on a link and it'll drill all the way down into the SAP transactions. So again, think of it as a 3-phased approach with, doing our strategic plan first.
Great, and thanks guys for all the great questions. I appreciate them coming in. Andrew, you raised your hand. I'll turn it to you to ask your question.
Sure. My name is Andrew, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have a question on the FDA approval and how your PLM module and the QM modules have been helpful, and what stage do you think we should bring them on? For example, we are talking about clinical trial data, patient-related HIPAA compliance data, and then, as you said, product tracking, impact analysis on any product change, composition change, all these things. So when do you think companies like us, in a preclinical trial stage, we should bring in all these modules like PLM, quality management, and all that?
I'm a big advocate, the sooner the better. The sooner you can get them in place, the better, because, once you are FDA approved, and if you're on a paper-based system like we were, it's much harder to go back and do that. It sounds like your company might be a little different than ours. We, all the clinical trials are the responsibility of the pharmaceutical company. We are a business to business, and so are the HIPAA compliance. So we don't have that to deal with, but we do have the device history records. We do have responsibility for the device. So if it would go out into the field and have a recall, we would be responsible for that. And also, from a product lifecycle management, all the way from the design of the product to the product going out to be sold. You want to be able to have your lot traceability, know who your suppliers are, where your parts are coming from, because once that goes into the field, you have to be able to trace every single part and every single product all the way back to every single supplier. So if you don't have a system to track that, it's going to make your life very hard.
Okay, so as soon as possible, early on.
Yeah, and I think, Tim, we rolled that out. I think it was part of, I'm going to call it phase 2A. So early on, getting it in place. And honestly, any of these things you can do sooner. You're not doing with, the more legacy you have, the more legacy data you have, the more challenges you have, the more organizational change you have. So I think, again, Tim's point is one that I think applies across the board. The sooner you can address those items, the better off the outcomes will be.
And also the best practices come along. So thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to spend a few moments kind of talking about the project. In an ideal world, everything goes 100% exactly as planned and smooth, and that's not always realistic. So, Tim, I'd love to hear from you. Were there any, surprises and kind of what you learned during that process? Certainly we've got folks on the line who are, evaluating SAP or, considering that they need to make an investment. And, what advice would you give them if you had to do it all over again?
So our challenges are probably different than a lot of companies because, we didn't have a system to begin with. We didn't migrate from a legacy system. We weren't using systems to run our business every single day. So a lot of the processes that we're developing are from scratch. We are still pre-commercial. We are building product, but it's clinical product. It's not sellable, usable product in human beings. Also, we do a lot of demo devices and things of that nature. So the biggest challenge for us is really having a young, you can think of our company, we're a very young development engineering house with some great minds. You're talking PhDs, very high-level life science people. And once we get into manufacturing, our average dollar per head count is going to switch more to a production manufacturing company. So you can imagine a lot of these smart engineers in here developing a great product, but they've not been at other companies. They don't even know what ERP means. They don't even understand really necessarily what scalability means. So it's really educating the staff on what is ERP, why do you need to do it for your job? And then also, you know, FICO's been very easy to adopt because, you know, you got to cut checks every day, you got to do transactions, you got to close the books. But, you know, production planning and manufacturing has sort of been a start, stall, because you're not building product every day, right? So if people aren't using the system every day, they have to go relearn the system. And so that's been our biggest challenge, is just getting people to get away from their paper processes, let go of their paper processes, and using the system. So this year is really what I would say, I like to call it our roadmap to commercialization, where, okay, we have all the tools we need. We have the Cadillac system. Now everybody needs to be using it every day. They have to be educated. There's no more starting, stopping. So that's been our biggest challenge.
Yeah, and you kind of answered my question. I was going to ask, you know, obviously, you know, not as much a change management as, you know, moving from one system to the next, but really just the adoption and, you know, embracing a new technology and a new way of doing your, you know, your job in a, you know, rapidly growing organization. So, you know, Brad, from a partner perspective, you know, what advice do you give someone like Tim who's trying to drive this behavior in his team based on what you guys have seen?
Yeah, and Tim's challenges, I think, you know, have been unique in that, you know, they're in a market space that's, you know, uncharted, developing products that don't exist, and growing rapidly, bringing on people on a very rapid basis. So the challenges, I think, are different for every company. I think, you know, Tim mentioned, you know, some of his might be unique, but, you know, in the life sciences space in general, I mean, we're seeing, you know, challenges, whether it's, you know, trying to control cost and, you know, inefficiencies in the clinical trials, to, you know, companies that are at a point where they're looking at, you know, how do we improve manufacturing and quality control in manufacturing, to, you know, dealing with cybersecurity threats, or, you know, to integrating data both from the enterprise and outside of the enterprise. And I think the challenges are unique across all of those areas, and I think that's what hopefully we do a really good job of, is coming in and understanding, again, those business challenges, and then giving the right guidance based on how we're going to address those, on how to make sure that the outcomes are the right outcomes, and the company's ultimately successful with their deployment.
Yeah, and Andrew, you had another question. I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I have two questions actually. So from provisioning till FICO implementation, when you make the first transaction, cut the checks, whatever it is, how long did that go? That's my number one question. Number two question, I would ask it right away. What do you guys look at in the future? What are all the modules you'd like to add? You know, what would you like to have it done differently if you had to do it all over again? That'll help us, companies like us, in pre-clinical trial. Thanks.
Yeah, so FICO was our quickest implementation. We were using QuickBooks, so we were able to import the data from QuickBooks into the SAP FICO modules, and then we were up and running in about 3 months. So that was a very quick implementation for us.
From provisioning onwards, okay,
yeah,
3 months. Got
it. Very quick.
Okay.
I never thought it would go that fast, but
as long as your Excel sheets and QuickBooks is clean, I think it'll go. The second question is, okay, now you are here. Are you looking at international sales? What are you planning? Are planning to add more modules?
So business analytics, obviously, and probably the next module would be, we don't have warehouse management at this time because we really don't understand the structure of our warehouse and our bin locations. And I've been in environments that, once you implement a bin methodology, it's very hard to unwind. So you're better to have that figured out before you bring on warehouse management. We do have the SD module, but we're not using it. We invoice, for our feasibility studies, we'll invoice the customer, but we're not in a full-blown SD mode today. So we have the capability, we're just not using it. So it's definitely one of those areas that, we're going to have to implement SD and understand our pricing structures, because every one of our customer partners, they're going to have different price breaks. They're going to have different royalty tiers. You're going to have the challenges of bringing on credit and collection folks, AR folks, and just, I think we have for the most part, we have all the modules we need. I think it's just building those modules out and enhancing what we already have, because we're just using what I would say, what's required today, and that's going to grow as we grow.
Okay.
And I think, Tim, that's been the approach. It's been very pragmatic and for good reason. The business changed, right? I remember there was a point in time where part of our discussions with you was around the strategy for contract manufacturing, right? You're going to look at CMO, and ultimately, I think those decisions changed over time. And I don't know what we would have done with the warehouse back then, because I think it's probably about the size of our living room. So I think, making sure that, again, you're bringing the right technical solution at the right time is a critical piece, and do it as quick as you can. But I think Tim's approach has been the right one. Be pragmatic about it, deploy it when you understand what it is you really are solving for.
Phased approach, basically.
That's it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. And another question in the chat from Kyle. Do you have an internal SAP COE that supports the application, or are you using another company, maybe even Dickinson, for your AMS services? And then also, just to piggyback on that, if internal, how big is your team?
Yeah, so our team, once we deployed SAP, we did hire one internal resource to own SAP business systems. That has since expanded to 2 full-time SAP internal resources. So we have that side of the IT business, and then we have what I call the infrastructure side, where they handle all the hardware. We also utilize Proterra, which was a recommendation by Dickinson. They handle all our basis backend. And then we do have, we do have some contracts with Dickinson and Aspire in case we run into some, what I would call programming type items that we don't have the in-house capabilities. And another thing that we've implemented is when we first started out, a lot of the people that we hired really didn't have SAP experience, and we've made that a requirement in the company. Almost every job description you look at today requires SAP experience. So you're gaining those what I would call super users and key users that are experts in their functional areas, because there's just no way 1 or 2 individuals can do this themselves. So the last 2 years have been exciting for me because HR has finally embraced the importance of SAP, and the SAP knowledge that we've brought in-house has just been phenomenal. So we can leverage that, train the trainer, and make sure that knowledge stays in-house for all the functional areas.
Perfect. Thank you. And we do have probably about 15 minutes or so. So if there are any last questions, you certainly want to make sure we get to those. I don't see any in the chat right now. I am curious, kind of understanding where you are in the business, were you guys affected by COVID and the subsequent supply chain issues? and, having been through that experience and, we're still kind of learning, has that brought new things to consideration as you're, looking at your technology and, trying to plan for the future?
Well, that's a great question. And, just so everyone can understand our product a little more, this is our product. You'll get an IV from you would go to like a Walgreens, the drug would be in the vial, you'd get the transfer, you'd put it in, it would transfer the drug, this would pop, and then you would get your device. And basically the back of the device is like a Band-Aid. It literally just sticks on your abdomen, which is your subcutaneous space. You push the button, it will administer the drug exactly the way it's intended based on that drug. When it's done, the button pops, you take it off and you throw it in the garbage. So you can imagine in a day of COVID, how valuable something like this would be if you could do this at home versus going into a hospital with a pandemic. You can't imagine the people that have foregone their treatments because they don't want to go into a hospital. So COVID has been an eye-opener for the FDA. It's been an eye-opener for a lot of pharmaceutical companies on how important home delivery and care is. So, so COVID has actually helped us from that perspective, because, when we were pitching our device years ago, telling people you can do this at home, they're like, who cares, right? Now, people don't have to get, and the beauty is our device is anywhere care. So it's not only at home, you can do this in the clinic, you can free up fair time where, an IV, it takes hours, it's painful, it takes extensive nurse time, where you could walk in a clinic, even a nurse practitioner, a receptionist could slap this on a person, they could go have a coffee, and then they could come back and they could take it off. And so the available chair time that it frees up and the available nurse time, because there's nurse shortages as well. I mean, this is just huge for everyone, the doctors, the nurses, the clinics. COVID, pandemic, great example, right? So, that I just wanted to mention that and how COVID impacted us. Also, the work from home model, we did have a lot of people working from home, and success factors came into play with that. Just imagine being a new person and being onboarded to a company and having no idea what anyone looks like, who they are. They could pull up success factors, they could look at the org charts, they could see the faces with the names. Also, I have the mobile app on success factors. I can approve job requisitions. And my finance department did not miss a beat, closing the books, working from home from a COVID standpoint. So, the timing could not have been better for a pandemic to have the right systems in place. So.
Yeah, it's interesting, depending on the industry and the timing, COVID was either detrimental or, a real opportunity. Are you guys evaluating supply chain solutions? I know you mentioned, you're not sure what warehouse is going to look like in terms of getting, raw materials. Has COVID or the supply chain issues been, has that been a conversation or a concern?
In our case, we've had some delays in supply chain, but it's not been dramatic. And I would just keep in mind that we're not commercial today, and we're not making millions of devices. So it's a little easier when you're doing batches of 20, 30, 40, maybe 90,000 devices, I think is what we're going to do in total this year. So, we're able to survive from a supply chain standpoint. This would probably be a different conversation if we were making millions of devices in a commercial environment.
Yeah, it's a wonderful device. It kind of reminds me of the Medtronic pump that they use for insulin patients. I'm wondering, you said it's sub-Q. Does that mean there's no intravenous injections that would go directly, I guess, into the bloodstream, or does that have that capability as well?
No, so it goes right into the sub-Q tissue. Our device is specific for abdomen today, but it could go into the thigh or the arm. And you can think of the infusion, our sweet spot is infusing anywhere from 5 ml to 50 ml, and we've been through multiple clinical trials. It's amazing. Some of the patients don't even think the device is working and they're being injected with their drug versus getting hooked up to an IV for hours and hours and hours. Mm-hmm. And the pharma, we do build the device specific for their drug. So every time you put this on, it's going to infuse the exact amount, the exact time. And our infusions go anywhere from, you can think of it as a minute and ml. So, probably the longest infusion will be 50 minutes. So anywhere from a minute to 50 minutes, which is a huge time savings from being hooked up to an IV and losing hours of your day. And then you just peel this off and put it in a sharps container or throw it away. And, these are biologic drugs, and it's a one-time use. It's not something where some of the pumps that you're thinking about, they're always connected, or, they're variably monitored to, give you insulin when you need it. This is, the one-time use. There's nothing like this on the market that can do high volume without reformulation of the drug. There are some players in the space that can do low volume, 1, 2, 3 ml, but no one, we have clinical trials where people have been, injecting, 50 ml with no problem. So
that's incredible. And the other device, do you guys own that, or does that all get sold to the pharmacy? It's pre-filled and then it goes out to the patient, or?
So that's one of our claims to fame. We use the pharma's container closure. So we accept whatever they have. So whether it's whatever vial they have, we'll take it and put it in our device, or we have a syringe product as well, where you take the syringe, you screw it on, and you'll put the medication in. This is a patient-filled device, not a pre-filled, preloaded. So okay. There's nothing like that on the market as well. And the beauty of that is, you can store this in your refrigerator because most biologics have to be cold. And this you can put away in a cabinet. So you have some safety child precautions there as well. And you're not taking up your refrigerator with 60 of these huge devices. So when the patient's ready to use it, they pull out the device, they pull out the drug, and they can use it immediately. The drug will be warmed and then they can put it on, where some of the competition, you have to wait 30 minutes before you can use it.
Incredible product, Tim. Thanks for sharing. Amazing.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty intrigued. We do have one more question. So Paige, I'll turn it to you before I kind of ask for some final closing thoughts.
Yes, thank you. And hey, Tim, hey, Brad, first, commendable product. Really love what you guys are doing. Also love hearing about the project. A question that I always like to ask is, understanding the importance of bridging your IT teams with your functional teams and making sure that they're aligned so that you truly do realize those business outcomes. How would you say, Tim, that Enable Injections was able to do that with the support of your partner, Dickinson, now Navisite?
So I would say that most of the heavy lifting today has been driven by partners like Dickinson and my internal SAP team, we're finally starting to put in the functional support and the key users. As I mentioned, we're starting to onboard, an SAP expert in each area. And so right now we have at least one key user in each area. And this roadmap to commercialization that I'm talking about is exactly what you just brought up. It's bringing the functional teams to the IT. So we're on the same page and we're ready to do that handoff. And that's really what the next year is going to entail. And then this will live on from there. So we're in our infancy of introducing that.
Yeah, and Paige, I'll just add to that, I think hopefully that's part of the value that we bring as part of the partnership. We come, to these relationships as business people who know the industry, and we're looking at the business issues and how to solve the business issues. By the way, we're leveraging technology. In this case, it was SAP, but we work with many technologies as Navisite. But the real objective is to, again, bring the right business acumen, the right industry knowledge to the table. And that's how you build the trust that Tim talked about, where he viewed us as a trusted advisor, not a technical solution provider, although we did that. So again, for me, that's part of the way we approach our partnerships and how we go to market is with business first, industry first, technical solutions behind that.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thank you. All right. Well, it is time to wrap up. Thank you both again for joining us and for all of our panelists. Tim, I'll close it out with you before I turn it over to Megan. What's one piece of advice that you would give to someone, sitting in your shoes back in, 2017, 2018, before you started this journey?
This would be my advice. Invest early, get ahead of the curve, and get it right the first time, because it'll save a lot of time and money in the future.
I think that's great advice. Megan, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So like I mentioned earlier, I'll send out an on-demand video here shortly. If your organization is looking to move towards a digital transformation, I'm happy to facilitate a conversation with Brad and the Dickinson team. So again, I want to give a big thank you to our guest speakers, Tim and Brad. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Megan and Lauren. Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your week.
All right.
Bye.
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 Thank you.